Welcome, Jason Novelli here to the program. Flip side, he's getting ready to do some battle coming up here. Titan FC 38, April 30th down in Florida, Miami, Florida. This one is. It's getting everyone's kind of staying down towards in their own little region right now. And I need to have your opponent's forgiveness right now because I'm probably going to butcher his name, but it's a very Cuban name. Yosdenis Cedeno is how I'm pronouncing it, but it's how do you say the last name? You think?
It's Cedeno. Cedeno. Put a little accent in there and it sounds good.
Yeah, so a little more difficult. But you've been on a pretty good run lately. Like, you've really been crushing it. Obviously, record's 11-1. You've won your last 4 in a row. The only loss you had was back in early 2015 against Ben. Really pretty impressive, the names that you beat on your way up. Has it really set in yet that you're kind of on your way into the big? You know, that people are going to start paying attention to you. They're going to start knowing who you are because of some of the names and some of the guys you're getting through.
It's starting to, little by little. People say, "Oh, you're going to the UFC. You're going here. You're going there," and I didn't really think too much about it. But little by little, I'm starting to see that it's closer and closer. So.
Well, you do have to be cautious. You can't start counting on the UFC to give you a phone call until the UFC actually gives you a phone call. But it's also, too, one of those things that they could very easily be calling you. Somebody gets hurt and they need someone to replace. They know you have a fight coming up. They can easily call you in the next couple of days and be like, "Hey, look, we need you to come in and fill in on this card instead," and then make you move over there. But it could also be the same thing with Bellator. They could be calling you up and asking you to come in and fill in on short notice because they know that you have a fight coming up. So it is one of those situations where, when you're with Titan, obviously Titan has a better relationship with the UFC, and that's kind of where a lot of the guys go. But one of the two of the big shows could be calling you very soon, especially with a record like 11-1. It's not like you were 10-0 and lost your last fight. You got your loss out done earlier. How hard was it for you to get back into the gym right after that first loss? Were you super motivated because your first loss you had, or was it one of those that took you a second to kind of figure out how things happened? Because you did get caught with a submission, and it was late in the fight. And I'm not sure how the fight was going before then. I just have the record in front of me. So it says that you got the rear naked choke in round 3 with about 2 minutes left in the fight. So how hard was it for you to get back in the gym after that first loss?
Well, I don't take anything away from the guy catching me, but I had a little injury and popping out the rib, and otherwise I would have been right back in the gym. It was short notice fight that I took, which I always say I'm ready to fight anybody, and I did. Maybe not on 30 hours notice anymore, but give it a week, I'll still fight anybody. But I had a little injury after that, but as soon as I was able to move, I was back in the gym and ready to work.
Hold on, so you fought Ben on a 30-hour notice, on a day's notice you fought him. And that's the fight that you lost?
Yeah, a little crazy. Jumped up a weight class. I got a little excited for a belt shot, so I went after that. And I fought a couple weeks ago, so I knew I wasn't out of shape, but it's still got to take it a little more serious with the prepping of your fight, and I had to pay for it that time. So
that's good. It's a lesson learned. Now you know that no more 30-hour notice fights. But give me 7 days, I'll be okay. Just not 30 hours, and staying at your own weight class, not jumping up a weight class.
Yeah.
So, all right, well, tell us, how did you get started in fighting? Like, why did you choose MMA over being an attorney? Or why did you choose MMA over being a fireman? Like, you could have done anything, but why did you choose to be a fighter instead?
Well, I always liked the competition of it all, and grew up wrestling when I was a kid, and then jumped into boxing around 20. And every time I started, well, both boxing and MMA, I was trying to do it for fun. And my competitive nature kind of took over. And when you realize, not even having to be good at something, when you realize that you really love something, it's kind of easy to pick it. And I'm a normal family guy. I got kids, and I was working 9 to 5. Well, you know how it is. It's more like 10, 12-hour days. But all of a sudden, I just realized that I didn't want to be there anymore. And I had a chance to jump on my MMA career. So 2 years ago, I quit my job and been full-time fighting ever since.
Wow, that's awesome. And you're making you're making enough money now as a fighter to not have to do anything else but train to be a fighter.
There's a little side jobs, but I don't have to work consistently 9 to 5 every day, and I can focus on my family and my passion. So that's a great life.
Yeah, it's an awesome life, no matter what you're doing. As long as it's something that you love and you can get up every morning and spend more time with your family, that's a great life. Let's talk about Yosdenis. Have you seen any tape on him? Have you watched anything on him at all? He's 10-5. Obviously, had a few more fights than you, just not as successful as you have. And really, his quality of competition hasn't been as tough as yours. But what do you see when you watch film on him as a competitor?
Well, thanks to UFC Fight Pass, I can see his last 4 fights since he was in the UFC. But even though he did fight the UFC, he didn't have to fight as quality guys as I expected. And they kind of set a game plan for what he's good at and what he's lacking in. So he's a little wild with his karate style, and his hands are all over the place. And even though I can beat him on the ground easy, I figure stand up as well. He's going to give me those openings when he throws those crazy hands.
Yeah, he tries to almost mimic a Lyoto Machida style, but very unrefined, where Lyoto is very refined and very straight-laced and has perfect timing. He really doesn't. It's a lot more difficult. But, he is training down at Blackzilians, and Blackzilians are getting known for their ground game. They're getting really, really good with their MMA style of grappling. Have you seen, even though he'd lost his last 2 in the UFC, and he's basically 1-3 out of his last 4, which is why he got released from the UFC. Do you see any improvement in his game at all, even though he was still losing? Did you see any game change in his last couple of fights?
Not so much, but in the fights I did notice a little better on his conditioning, and maybe that's more of his being able to be relaxed in the big stage. But he's still kind of at the same game, but he's now had close to a year to work on that. So I'm going to assume that he's been fixing all those holes as much as he could within a year. But there's only so much you can do.
What Jason's talking about is he hasn't fought since he fought Cody Filster in Mendez versus McGregor, July 11th. 2015. So he hasn't competed since that card, and it's now coming up April 30th, and the next time he fights. It's a long time off, not to be inside that cage, especially when you're coming off back-to-back losses. It gets more and more difficult to get those wins back the longer time you have outside of the cage. So, I got to agree with you. I think he is trying to fix those holes. I think he is trying to improve his game overall, but also, too, being in practice and hitting the reps are not necessarily the same as can you hit the reps when you get inside the cage. So it's one of those we have to wait and see what Yosdenis brings when he steps into the cage. Is there any I don't want to say worry, it's the wrong word because you're not worried, but any concern that he might have developed a whole different thing that you're not prepared for because you haven't had any time to see him in the last year?
Not so much. It's been a year, and like I said, there's only so much you can do, and it's not like I haven't been working on my game, and I can't worry too much about what he wants to do. I'm more in there to implant my game plan and my will and take over the fight. Perfect.
Love it. Jason, thanks so much for coming on here. I appreciate it. He's getting ready to fight Yosdenis Cedeno coming up here in Titan Fighting Championships 38, April 30th in Miami, Florida. Have a great rest of your training camp. We'll talk later.
All right. Thanks a lot, Frank.